Good morning and welcome to day 2 of OUT Conference 2021. Firstly, a few words from our sponsor and some housekeeping. So if you could put up the slide, please, Deb, thank you. Here's the various ways to stay in touch and where to get help. So use the OUTC21 hashtag, find us on Twitter and Discord. Help is also there if you need help from the help desk. I need to offer thanks to our sponsors for this session, who are Adena and Notable from Adena service. Notable from Adena is a cloud-based computational notebook service that provides access to the most commonly used computational notebooks, and also comes with auto-grading feature enabling teachers to set assignments for a class of learners with defined rules around automated marking of the code that the learner has written. And Adena is a spin-off out of the University of Edinburgh. So thank you for your sponsorship, Notable and Adena. Just to note as well, these sessions are recorded. You can play them back after the event. And please be polite and follow our etiquette rules. So without further ado, I just want to introduce today Nikki Stuart, Melissa Highton and Stuart Nicol. And they're going to hopefully answer the question, can an ancient institution change its ways? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Yeah, I mean, we love presenting at ALT because this is really important community for us. University of Edinburgh is a leader in online learning. We've been doing it for a very long time. We have lots of online master's courses, lots of MOOCs, and we do have educational technology spin-outs like Adena. And Notable is a service that has actually, as well as we're advertising it because they're sponsoring this session, it is actually one of the things that we touched on in this project, which was how to provide support for students doing online learning at scale at University of Edinburgh. And what we're going to talk about is whether taking an ancient institution into quite a new area of work, which is micro-credentials, and thinking about how those different, we already had established masters, we already had established MOOCs, but trying to think about micro-credentials, which is quite the hot topic at the moment. And if you are interested in working on micro-credentials, we are recruiting, and you can work with Nikki and Stuart to do this work with us. Nikki's going to do most of the presenting because she was the project and program manager looking at what we did. And this was a 3-4 year piece of work, which we've now finished. And we finished the first chunk of the work. And I think the reason we wanted to present is just to talk about what kind of things you have to do, what kind of pace you need to go if you're trying to change an institution to think about something in different ways, and just reflecting on what took the time, how we managed to do it, what seems to be successful. And it's just an opportunity for us to share our learning with you. So Nikki, I'm going to let you take it away. And I'm sure we'll get questions in the comments.
Thanks. Yeah. So as Melissa was saying there, University of Edinburgh has been delivering online education for some time. We've had online masters since 2005, and we've been delivering MOOCs for many years as well. But despite successes from these courses and programs, online education has never been quite seen as main university business. So in 2018, our Distance Learning at Scale program was established to transform the way we deliver online education, increase student numbers, launch new micro-credentials and online master's programs, to identify, test and pilot forms of automation which would assist teachers and learners. And we had 3 years to do all of that. So it really was quite a challenge for leadership. And then for the remainder of the presentation, we're going to cover some of the different leadership challenges our programme came across, and consider what you might be able to learn from some of our experiences. Sorry, just trying to navigate the different technology here. So the first area we're going to look at is where we provided leadership and change. As a framework for our change programme, we followed a well-known and established process for Cotter's 8-step process for leading change. And the graphic on the side of the slide there outlines those 8 steps. In order to gain the senior management approval for our investment, Our business case established a sense of urgency that immediate action was needed to maintain Edinburgh as a leader in online education and to explore the opportunities for micro-credentials early on. While Edinburgh's existing online tutors shared our goal to improve and the support for online teachers and increase the visibility of the benefits for online courses, some of the early messages from our programme around the need for scale transformation didn't quite fit with everybody. Edinburgh, while Edinburgh was delivering online programmes for many years, suddenly everybody at the university wanted to have a say in what we were doing. And our guiding coalition ended up quite weighty with our board, including many vice principals. And updates had to be shared with various committees along the way. And a lot of our early effort was spent drafting committee papers, which had to give reassurances that we were operating within existing academic policies. We did require a policy exception for our micro-credential framework. And as the first UK institution to produce a MicroMasters with edX, we also had to first design what it would look like outside the US credit system and agree an approach that would balance the impact on student systems and support and the need to admit students at the point of the final assessment, which would allow us to award credit to those students. It took about a year, but we eventually got approval to proceed and to test our new micro-credential framework. So 3 years on from starting our programme, the urgency of change has shifted slightly, and our guiding coalition has new members. And we've been able to recruit the principal, who's now also keen to lead conversations about micro-credentials and digital badges. Our strategic vision might not have been delivered within the initial 3 years, but it has given us a clearer idea of what the strengths and opportunities to Edinburgh are, and these will really help us continue to move forward. I'm going to hand over to Stuart now, who's going to talk about a couple of other areas of leadership.
Sure, thanks, Nikki. And just going to talk quickly about leadership in technology. Do we have that slide?
It's on my screen. I'm hoping it's on yours.
Yeah, cool, thanks. So just another one of another step in Cotter's change process is once that sense of urgency has been achieved is to enable action by removing barriers. So one of the things we did here to remove barriers from a technology point of view is we moved from quite a distributed model with our online master's programs where teams that were creating those courses were distributed into schools to having a central team of experts to produce these new at-scale courses. It was kind of modeled on what we did with MOOCs before, which is a central team, but that was much more of a small innovation group. So by building this team, it provided the benefit of streamlining processes rather than lots of different people coming up with the same answers differently, and getting that guidance and expertise into a kind of more streamlined kind of format. And then we could then share that knowledge back with the local teams where helpful. So we built up this team of instructional designers, media producers, project managers, and course administrators that Nikki led. And we spent time refocusing what the innovation was. I guess with MOOCs, we'd kind of got to the point where media seemed to be the innovation. And we kind of refocused that so that learning design and the course itself was the innovation, and it allowed the central team to pilot new technologies and to meaningfully design those technologies into the fabric of these new courses that we were building. But what we did find is that although we removed some barriers by creating a central team and a central service, but there were other barriers that we bumped into around things like university governance and existing experience and success in the areas of MOOCs and online masters. And those are barriers that we found really hard to, and we, in some cases, didn't manage to remove. In the area of technology, we were able to kind of experiment with a few different learning technologies, for like learning analytics, adaptive learning, computational notebooks. Learning analytics was quite an interesting one, and there was some barriers that we really bumped up against there, and some perceptions within the university. I guess there's a bit of a reticence or suspicion about learning analytics. Maybe I kind of thought that in the context of Edinburgh, it's not the idea of retention and flagging at-risk students isn't necessarily something that is seen as a big issue. So it led to our choice of tool, which was a OnTask, which is a coaching tool. And then once we tried to get that implemented, we bumped up against the very robust ethics approval processes that the universities put in place. So I think that really limited some of the successes we were able to achieve through the use of that new technology. It's also worth noting, I guess, that we did still see real benefits of building this central team when the pandemic hit last year. We were really quickly able to redirect that central team to create online courses to support students in the transition to hybrid teaching. And also we created 9 pop-up studios across the university very, very quickly, which Nikki led again, which we wouldn't have been able to do before. Some of the short-term innovations that we gained, we launched the university's first admissions chatbot, which was a big achievement. We worked with the Research Centre in Digital Education to research attitudes into automation and AI. We trialed that coaching tool OnTask, so we got really good insights into how that worked. And also we piloted computational notebooks, which was something that was very, very successful and is provided by Adina, that notable service, and the auto grading for Python assessments has proved really, really useful within the context of the courses, the predictive analytics courses that we've been using. Could move on to the next slide, Nikki. Cool. And then just to talk a little bit about leadership and teaching. So we developed a digital pedagogy. This had strong academic support. It was developed in partnership with the Centre for Centre for Research and Digital Education. I guess it addressed the suspicion about the role of technology in achieving scale and what we mean by scale, and it retained the importance of the teacher and the teacher function. But that's not to say that messaging around scale has been a real challenge in this project. The course that we created, the Edinburgh model for online teaching, it's had great feedback, and we've repurposed it a number of times. We delivered it first in edX at the beginning of last year, but we repurposed it into Learn, and actually it was very, very successful last summer in training teachers or the development of teachers over the summer in preparation for hybrid teaching during the pandemic, and we had over 700 people that went through that. We evidenced that partnering with edX could produce high quality courses. I would say the MicroMasters that we've produced is the most QA'd course that we've ever produced because there was so much scrutiny on it. And although we didn't manage to engage the broad number of programs across the university that we hoped for, a really big positive outcome was that the business school, which is a school that in the past had been a bit reluctant to teach in the online area, they've ended up with 2 micro-credentials and they're kind of eager for more. They're looking at planning a full online master's. We launched Edinburgh's first micro-credential and I think the UK's first micro-masters, which is edX's trademarked micro-credential. I think where we did have issues was around the governance of how to manage this new type of student that bridges the gap between an open learner and a university matriculated student. That was a very challenging layer of the project. And Cotter talks about this volunteer army. It's about the project becoming more of a movement than a project. Although it's become really strong in the business school where they now have got themselves to a point where they're self-motivated to move into the online learning area, we probably didn't manage to build up that volunteer army across the university more widely. And that's maybe impacted by some of the early messaging around the urgency that was created with this at-scale teaching message that Nikki talked about earlier. Nikki, I'll hand back over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to pick up on a few things that didn't go so well and that we were thinking maybe you might be able to learn from. Stuart kind of already mentioned about that there was suspicions around maybe what we were trying to achieve with some of our kind of learning analytics and the ethics around those. But what it meant that our pilots got held up in multiple committees and the scope of what we were trying to achieve got really restricted. Our coaching pilot, which used the learning analytics, took over 6 months to get approval. And then when we did get approval, its use was so limited that our pilot data meant that we were kind of left unable to really fully understand the benefits to learners and tutors. We did learn a lot from developing and supporting our admissions bot, but the governance decisions around that again meant that it was only deployed for one program, which meant that the overall cost of running the bot kind of outweighed the savings for the staff time. In addition to the admissions bot, we had ambitions to develop teacher bots, which would help tutors with repetitive administrative tasks that could be automated. So while chatbot technology is fairly well embedded in commercial sectors, it was more challenging to identify some of the technology that would support our needs. The technology in this area has moved on a lot in the last 3 years, so we do plan to revisit this again at the right time at some point soon. So it can take many years to change a university's business model, but working with external partners whose aims are to disrupt and transform education can be challenging, as they want to move pretty fast. edX were still understanding and developing their how their platform would support full online master's programs. And at the time when we started working with them, MicroMasters were only a few years old and still evolving. What this meant was that their business models and priorities changed over the years. And at times, this also meant that we had to go back and revisit some of our approach to what we were designing and delivering. One of Kotter's 8 steps is to sustain acceleration, but it's exhausting to try and keep it up sometimes when you're trying to lead and push for changes. And our team really did struggle at times with change fatigue. In order to move quickly, we had to design the Edinburgh Micro-Credential Framework, develop the processes, and produce the courses all at the same time. And this meant that some decisions and conversations had to be revisited, sometimes more than once. We've already, Stuart mentioned about there being more scrutiny of our courses than there had been of any other course at the university in terms of QA and just general buzz and talk around it. But this meant that some of the change fatigue that set in meant that people just fell back on old practices rather than kind of pushing for more change and more innovation in the area. Let me just change the slide. But in terms of leading change, we have a few lessons that we wanted to share with you. Much of what we were trying to do, in particular on the technology side, was research and development. Our programme was ambitious, and in order to learn, we needed to try things out first. Being first also made it challenging. We had to convert the US-based micro-credential to fit with the UK system, learn how bots could chat to Edinburgh students, and push existing university policies and procedures to adapt to a new world of learning. Not everything was a success in what we tried, but the learning from that trying has still been valuable, and we understand much more than we did 3 years ago about what is achievable. The aim to increase student numbers did help us get the buy-in for the investment, but it wasn't helpful that our success was linked to those. The benefits of increasing student numbers should still come through the changes that we've put in progress, but our programme was perceived as missing the goals as it didn't deliver all those benefits within the 3-year time frame. We did change attitudes, and investing the time to do so was important. But it also allowed us to recently get agreement to continue changes needed to agree a flexible micro-credential framework for the university. So really, our change is kind of incremental, and we do hope to get to the longer term goals eventually. I talked earlier about the many committee papers that we produced at the start of the programme. But they didn't stop. We kept creating them. We've kept talking about them, and we've made a real effort to keep talking about the breadth of our work and sharing our findings with anyone who will listen to us. And finally, we made connections between the work that we've been doing and university strategy wherever possible. Stuart mentioned that when the university had to respond to the pandemic, our team was able to quickly support a range of activities, which included the producing new courses for students and increasing media production capabilities. And as the interest in online CPD and executive education has continued, we've evidenced the links between what we've delivered and our ongoing and the university's ongoing need for further change. So the question we asked at the beginning was whether an ancient institution can change ways. And yeah, we believe it definitely can, but trying to embed real transformation is going to take longer than 3 years. We've been able to raise the conversations on micro-credentials and standalone short courses, so they're now sitting at the highest levels of the university, and we've really learned a lot about the strengths and opportunities for Edinburgh and the strategic direction that we think will work for us. And we're going to continue to progress those that work and those conversations. We haven't talked much about the micro-credentials themselves, but if you're interested in finding them, we've got the links there at the bottom of the slide, and you can find them on edX. And as Melissa said, if you are interested in what we've talked about, then we're recruiting at the moment, and we've got a couple of jobs advertised at the moment, with some to be published soon. And then also, I just wanted to make you aware, of course, that we've got running at the moment, where we've kind of distilled a lot of the learning that we've in terms of our course production stream side of things, and that course is currently running on FutureLearn. So have a look. Okay, that's us.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. We've got a couple of minutes for questions from the audience, so if we can be brief in our answers. You mentioned exhausting, keeping up the pace of change. Simon Parr asked how you will be able to maintain the momentum and the sense of urgency as the pandemic eases. Not sure who's going to pick that one up.
So
sorry, my doorbell went at exactly that moment. Sorry. Yes, with this Simon's question, I think that the thing about the pandemic, actually, because we started this before the pandemic and after the pandemic, the urgency from the institution about we should be doing micro-credentials, it's suddenly the hottest topic. And actually, we're able to say, we've actually been looking into this for several years. Luckily, we're very well positioned for this. So I think that the pandemic has been good in that lots of people now have much more interest in doing online courses. So even though we had many online courses at Edinburgh, the demand for everybody to do even more of them is quite important. Very much what people are talking about. I think that we did achieve a lot. The metrics aren't the only thing, as we always know that. And if they were the only thing, if they were the most important thing, more people would be doing MOOCs, because that's where you can get these huge numbers. But I think that what's important about this, the course review and the quality assurance, was the engagement by so many people in the university and insisting on the quality of this thing, because it was a new thing, a MicroMasters, whereas in fact whether those same quality standards are being applied to other bits of online learning. So you all will be familiar with this idea that if you try to do something new, suddenly there's a lot of focus on it, and you have to reassure people that we do actually know how to make online materials, we do actually know how to learn and teach online. But perhaps that, as well as the flip side of the exhausting for us and for the team to lead, the perception now that it was a lot of work and that a lot of work was done is almost coming back as the problem, which why would we continue to do this when it was clearly so much work? So trying to get people to think about the work that we've done as essential underpinning infrastructure for now, what we might do with micro-credentials and badges, I think has been very important, and that change will really be seen from now on. And I think that perhaps Nikki is modest in that she has actually put into place a lot of change within the institution. It's just that we haven't quite clarified that the institution knows that yet.
And I guess the metrics, so there's a couple of questions in the chat room about metrics that I'm afraid we're not going to have time to get to. So I suggest we possibly move this over to Discord, and we can continue the conversation there, because there's a few more questions. But I guess the metrics is the proof of the pudding, isn't it? If it's successful, then you need to keep doing it. It would be the bottom line. I'm afraid we've run out of time now, so thank you very much again, Nikki, Melissa, and and Stuart for your presentation. There are more questions in the chat room, so the StreamYard will be there if you want to make any brief comments or direct people to a Discord thread or Twitter thread where you can continue the conversation. So I think there's quite a lot of, and in normal times we normally go out to the coffee room, wouldn't we, and continue the conversation there. So thank you very much again, everybody, and thank you for the audience for contributing your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but thank you very much.